The dust settled around Martha's worn boots as she stood at the edge of town watching the sun paint the sky in shades of amber and rose. She had been traveling for 3 days now, and her body ached in ways she had forgotten it could. The pink dress she wore was wrinkled and stained from the journey, and her hair hung in loose waves around her tired face. She clutched a small leather bag that held everything she owned in this world, which wasn't much anymore. The town of Harmony Creek stretched before her with its wooden buildings and dirt streets looking like so many other places she had passed through. But this time she had no money left and nowhere to go. The general store was closing for the day, and she could see the shopkeeper turning. The sign in the window next to it stood a modest boarding house with a painted sign that read, "Clean rooms, fair prices." Martha's stomach tightened as she realized she couldn't afford even the fairest of prices. She thought about sleeping under the stars again, but her bones protested at the very idea. Just then, a man on horseback rode past, kicking up a small cloud of dust. He was older, perhaps in his late 50s, with weathered skin that spoke of years under the sun. He wore a brown hat and a red handkerchief around his neck, and there was something steady in the way he sat his horse. He glanced at her briefly, and she saw kindness in his eyes before he continued down the street. Martha took a deep breath and walked toward the boarding house. Maybe she could work for a room, she thought. Maybe the owner needed help with cleaning or cooking. Her hands knew how to work, even if her heart felt heavy. The wooden steps creaked under her feet as she climbed to the porch. Through the window she could see a warm glow of lamplight, and it made her chest ache with longing. She raised her hand to knock but hesitated. What would she say? How many times had she stood at doors like this hoping for kindness? The door opened before she could decide, and a round woman with gray hair and spectacles looked at her with curiosity. "Can I help you, dear?" the woman asked. Her voice was neither warm nor cold, just matter of fact. Martha opened her mouth to explain, but the words stuck in her throat. She was so tired of explaining, of asking, of being the one who needed help. "I was wondering," she finally managed, "if you might need help around the boarding house in exchange for a room." The woman looked her up and down, taking in the dusty dress and the exhausted eyes. "I'm sorry, dear," she said, and her voice did soften a little. "But I have all the help I need right now." Martha nodded, feeling her hopes sink. "I understand," she said quietly. "Thank you anyway." She turned to leave, but the woman called after her. "The diner down the street might need someone," she offered. "Mrs. Patterson is always looking for help." Martha thanked her again and made her way back down the steps. The evening air was growing cooler, and she pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Diner was easy to find, with its cheerful yellow curtains and the smell of cooking food that made her stomach clench with hunger. But when she inquired inside, Mrs. Patterson shook her head apologetically. "Just hired someone yesterday," she said. "But you might try the saloon. They sometimes need help with cleaning in the mornings." Martha thanked her and stepped back outside. The sun was lower now, casting long shadows across the street. She didn't want to try the saloon. She had standards, even if she had nothing else. Instead, she walked to the edge of town where a small stable stood. Maybe she could sleep in the hay for the night. It wouldn't be the first time. The stable was quiet, except for the soft sounds of horses shifting in their stalls. She was about to slip inside when she heard a voice behind her. "Evening, ma'am." She turned to find the man on horseback from earlier. He had dismounted and was leading his horse toward the stable. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes and the gray at his temples. "Evening," she replied, trying to sound as if she had every right to be there. He studied her for a moment, and she felt exposed under his gaze. But there was no judgment in his eyes, only a quiet understanding that made her want to cry. "You new to Harmony Creek?" he asked. "Just passing through," she said, which was what she always said. He nodded slowly, as if he understood more than her words revealed. "Name's Thomas Reed," he said, tipping his hat slightly. "I run a ranch about 5 miles north of here." "Martha," she said. "Martha Collins." They stood in silence for a moment, and Martha wondered what he saw when he looked at her. A woman down on her luck, certainly. Someone who didn't belong, probably. But Thomas just smiled, a small, gentle smile. "Were you planning to sleep in the stable?" he asked, and his tone held no accusation. Martha felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. "I'll be moving on tomorrow," she said defensively. Thomas shook his head. "That's not what I asked." Martha looked down at her worn boots. "I don't have money for the boarding house," she admitted, and the words felt like defeat. Thomas was quiet for a long moment. "Come with me," he finally said. Martha looked up startled. "What?" "The boarding house has good rooms and Mrs. Henderson serves breakfast," he said. "Let me settle you there for the night." Martha stared at him. "I can't accept that," she said, though everything in her wanted to. "Why not?" Thomas asked simply. "Because I don't know you and you don't know me, and I can't pay you back." Thomas considered this. "My wife used to say that kindness isn't a loan," he said quietly. "It's a gift, and you don't pay back gifts, you just pass them forward when you can." The mention of his wife in the past tense made Martha's heart ache. "I still can't," she said. But her voice wavered. "You look tired." "Martha Collins," Thomas said gently. "And I'm guessing you've been tired for a long time now." Something in his words broke through her defenses. Maybe it was the gentleness, or maybe it was just that she was so very tired of being strong. "I am," she whispered. Thomas nodded. "Then let's get you a warm bed," he said. "You can argue with me about it tomorrow if you still feel the need." Martha followed him back to the boarding house, her mind spinning. She wanted to protest, to maintain her dignity, to prove she didn't need help, but her body betrayed her, moving toward the promise of rest like a moth to flame. Mrs. Henderson looked surprised when Thomas came through the door, with Martha behind him. "Evening, Thomas," she said. "Evening, Ruth." He replied, "This is Martha Collins, and she'll be needing a room for the night." Mrs. Henderson glanced between them with curiosity, but she was too polite to ask questions. "Of course," she said. "I have a nice room on the second floor." Thomas paid for the room, and Martha watched the transaction, feeling both grateful and uncomfortable. When Mrs. Henderson handed her the key, their eyes met, and Martha saw understanding their breakfast. "Is it 7?" Mrs. Henderson said kindly. "And there's fresh water in the pitcher upstairs." Martha thanked her and turned to Thomas. "I don't know what to say." "Then don't say anything," he replied. "Just get some rest." But Martha couldn't let it go. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. Thomas looked at her for a long moment. "Because someone did it for me once," he said, "and because my Emma would have wanted me to." Emma, his wife's name, hung in the air between them. "How long ago?" Martha asked softly. 2 years this spring," Thomas said, and his voice carried the weight of that loss. Martha nodded. She understood grief. It was a language she spoke fluently. "Thank you, Thomas Reed," she said. "I won't forget this." He tipped his hat to her. "Sleep well, Martha Collins." She watched him leave, and then climbed the stairs to her room. It was simple but clean, with a real bed and white sheets, and a window that looked out over the quiet street. Martha sat on the edge of the bed, and for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to feel safe. She washed her face and hands in the basin and changed into her only other dress. Then she lay down on the bed and pulled the quilt over her. The pillow was soft beneath her head, and the sheets smelled of lavender. Martha closed her eyes and felt tears slip down her cheeks. They were tears of relief and gratitude, and something else too. Maybe hope. She slept deeply that night without dreams. When she woke, the morning sun was streaming through the window, and for a moment, she forgot where she was. Then memory returned, and with it the awareness that she would have to face Thomas Reed again. She dressed carefully and braided her hair, trying to look presentable. Downstairs, the dining room smelled of coffee and bacon, and her stomach growled loudly. Mrs. Henderson greeted her with a warm smile. "Good morning, dear," she said. "Sit anywhere you like." Martha chose a table by the window, and Mrs. Henderson brought her coffee and a plate of eggs and bacon and biscuits. "This is too much," Martha protested. "Nonsense," Mrs. Henderson said. "Thomas paid for room and board." Martha ate slowly, savoring every bite. She couldn't remember the last time she had eaten a real breakfast. Other guests came and went, and Martha listened to their conversations. Talk of weather and crops in the upcoming church social. Normal life. The kind of life she used to have before everything fell apart. After breakfast, she went outside wondering what to do next. Part of her wanted to leave town before she saw Thomas again. But another part of her knew she owed him more than that. She was standing on the porch trying to decide when she heard the sound of hoofbeats. Thomas rode up and dismounted with the easy grace of a man who had spent his life on horseback. Morning. He said, "Morning." She replied, "I wanted to thank you again." Thomas waved a hand dismissively. "How'd you sleep?" "Better than I have in months," she admitted. He nodded as if this pleased him. "Good." They stood in silence and Martha searched for the right words. "I'll be on my way now," she said. "But I want you to know that what you did, it meant more than I can say." Thomas looked at her thoughtfully. "Where are you headed?" Martha hesitated. The truth was she had no